On September 29, 1997, Apple Incorporated had exactly 90 days of cash left in the bank. 90 days until the payroll checks would bounce. 90 days until the lights in Cupertino went dark. 90 days until one of the most iconic names in American business history disappeared forever. This wasn't just a slump, it was an extinction event. Wall Street had already written the obituary. The stock was trading at under $1. Experts said sell. Rivals smelled blood. Michael Dell, when asked what he would do with Apple, famously said he'd shut it down and give the money back to the shareholders. To the world, Apple was a corpse that just hadn't stopped moving yet. But then, something unexpected happened. A founder returned, a desperate partnership was announced, and over the next 20 years, that same dying company became the most valuable business on planet Earth. This is the story of Apple's near death and the historic resurrection that changed the world forever. To understand Apple's fall, you first need to understand the world it was born into. The year was 1976. Personal computing was a fantasy. Computers were room-sized machines owned by governments. Ordinary people had never even touched a keyboard. Then came two college dropouts working out of a garage. IBM dominated the industry with their massive mainframes for corporations. They didn't believe regular people needed or wanted a machine on their desk. But Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak saw something the giants did not. They believed a computer could be simple, elegant, and above all, personal. Ordinary people had never touched a keyboard. IBM dominated the industry. They made mainframes for corporations. They did not believe regular people needed or wanted a machine on their desk. In 1977, they released the Apple II. It had color graphics and a built-in keyboard. It looked like a home appliance, not a science project. It became the first successful mass-produced personal computer in history. By 1980, Apple had grown from two men in a garage to a billion-dollar public company. Then came 1984 and the Macintosh. The famous Super Bowl commercial introduced a sleek all-in-one computer with a mouse and a graphical interface. It was light years ahead of anything from IBM or Microsoft. But while the products were brilliant, the leadership was fracturing from within. Steve Jobs was a visionary, but he was also volatile. He screamed at engineers and refused to compromise. In 1985, after a brutal power struggle with CEO John Sculley, the man Jobs himself had recruited from Pepsi, Jobs was pushed out of his own company. He left devastated and sold nearly all his stock. Jobs started a new company called Next, building high-end workstations. Meanwhile, without its founder, Apple began to drift aimlessly. The decade after Jobs left was a slow-motion disaster. Apple released dozens of confusing product lines with no clear strategy, losing focus and market share. Products like the Macintosh Portable were too heavy and expensive. The Newton handheld became a national joke because it couldn't recognize handwriting. Microsoft was winning because Windows had copied the Mac's interface, but was cheaper and available on every manufacturer's hardware. Apple was cornered. By 1996, Apple had lost $8 billion in market value. The stock had fallen from $60 to under $5. Layoffs were constant, and morale was destroyed. In a desperate move, Apple bought Jobs' company, Next, for $429 million just to get a new operating system. The deal brought Jobs back as an advisor, but within months, he had pushed out the board and become interim CEO. He walked into the boardroom and asked, "Tell me what is wrong with this company." The answer was everything. But his biggest challenge was the ticking clock, 90 days of cash. To stop the bleeding, Jobs did the unthinkable. He called his greatest rival, Bill Gates. Microsoft and Apple were locked in a bitter legal war over software patents. But Jobs knew that for Apple to survive, he had to end the war. He needed cash, and he needed Microsoft's software support. At Macworld 1997, Jobs announced a partnership that stunned the world. Bill Gates appeared on a giant screen over the audience. People booed and hissed. They felt betrayed. But the deal was a lifeline, a $150 million investment, and a 5-year commitment for Microsoft Office on the Mac. This deal wasn't about the money. Apple spent that in weeks. It was about credibility. If Bill Gates was willing to bet on Apple, the world knew Apple wasn't going to vanish. Jobs told the crowd, "We have to let go of this notion that for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose." It was a masterstroke of pragmatism. With breathing room secured, Jobs began a brutal cleanup. He canceled 70% of Apple's products. Printers, scanners, and the Newton were gone. He simplified everything down to a simple grid: 2 desktops and 2 laptops. One for consumers, one for professionals. No more waste, no more confusion. Next, Jobs hired Tim Cook, a logistics expert from Compaq. Cook was the silent architect of the turnaround. He shut down Apple's inefficient factories and moved manufacturing to Asia. Inventory dropped from months to just 6 days. Apple stopped losing money and started building a massive war chest. The real turnaround started with the iMac in 1998. Translucent plastic, no floppy drive, and USB ports. It looked like nothing else on the market. Critics called it a toy, but it sold 800,000 units in 5 months. Overnight, Apple was cool again, and more importantly, it was profitable. Behind the scenes, the next acquisition was paying off. In 2001, Apple released Mac OS X. It was the stable, modern foundation the company had lacked for a decade. This software didn't just power the Mac, it would eventually become the foundation for everything from the iPhone to the Apple Watch. While the 1997 cache was vital, the real rescue continued into the early 2000s. Microsoft's commitment to keep developing Office for Mac was the only thing keeping business users from switching to Windows. It bought Apple the time it needed to build its own software ecosystem, culminating in the 2001 launch of Mac OS X. In 2001, Apple ignored every consultant and opened its own retail stores. They weren't just shops, they were experience centers. The Genius Bar turned technical support into a hospitality service. Within 3 years, Apple stores were generating $1 billion in annual sales, faster than any retailer in history. Later that year, the iPod was born. 1,000 songs in your pocket. It wasn't just a music player, it was a Trojan horse. It brought millions of Windows users into the Apple ecosystem for the first time through iTunes. Apple was no longer just a computer company, it was a digital lifestyle brand. Then came 2007, the iPhone. A touchscreen phone that killed the BlackBerry and changed human behavior forever. Jobs famously pitched it as 3 devices in one. It was the ultimate convergence, and it launched the App Store, creating an entirely new global economy and thousands of new businesses. By 2018, Apple became the first American company to hit a $1 trillion valuation. The company that nearly went bankrupt in 1997 was now the most successful commercial enterprise in history. It wasn't just luck, it was the result of a singular vision and a refusal to settle for good enough. What can investors learn? First, focus beats fragmentation. When you do too much, you do nothing well. Jobs' greatest contribution wasn't what Apple made, but what he refused to make. In business, saying no is often more important than saying yes. Focus is the key to scale. Lesson 2. Great products win in the end. Marketing gets you the first sale, but the product gets you the second. Apple had the better computer and the better phone. In the long run, the market rewards the best product, even if it takes 20 years for the world to catch up. Lesson 3. Founders matter. Steve Jobs' vision was the heartbeat of the company. Without it, Apple was lost in the woods. With it, it was unstoppable. When you are investing, don't just look at the balance sheet. Look for the person driving the vision. Identity is the ultimate competitive advantage. Apple nearly died, but it came back because one man refused to let it fail. That is the story behind the symbol. Thank you for watching Spotlight Business Report. We tell the stories of the world's most influential companies every Tuesday and Thursday. Subscribe now. Next episode, Enron, the most infamous collapse in American history. You won't want to miss it. I'm your host, Miya. See you next time.